My dear readers, listeners, and of course friends, where to begin with this latest installment of the Jordan Peterson experience? Episode 437, or is it 1437? I've lost count of these interminable verbal jousting matches masquerading as intellectual discourse. In this particular chapter of the saga, Dr. Peterson, the reigning pontiff of obfuscatory prose, crosses swords with Congressman Dean Phillips, a man who seems to have mistaken his autobiography for a compelling political platform. The collision of these two egos is not so much a meeting of minds as it is a mutually assured destruction of coherence. The good doctor kicks things off with a characteristic verbal salvo, a meandering monologue so chock full of academic jargon and tortured metaphors that one wonders if he's auditioning for a role in a Dadaist play. Not to be outshone, Phillips counters with a saccharine rendition of his life story, painting himself as a walking, talking embodiment of the American dream. As the conversation lumbers on like a wounded wildebeest, it becomes painfully clear that genuine dialogue is not on the agenda. Peterson, never one to miss an opportunity for gratuitous name-dropping, seems more intent on crowbarring references to Jung and Dostoevsky into every third sentence than actually engaging with his interlocutor's points. Meanwhile, Phillips gamely trots out a series of focus group talking points, delivering them with all the passion and conviction of a hostage reading a ransom note. But the real piece de resistance of this intellectual farce comes when the discussion inevitably veers into the treacherous waters of identity politics. Here, Peterson truly shines, treating the audience to a bravura performance of histrionic pearl-clutching about the existential threat posed by trans activists and the tyrannical hegemony of progressive orthodoxy. One can practically hear the sound of 1,000 Twitter threads being spun as he froths himself into a lather of apocalyptic rhetoric. Not to be outdone, Phillips valiantly dons the mantle of the reasonable centrist, offering up a series of tepid disclaimers and mealy-mouthed appeals to civility that land with all the force of a wet napkin. The spectacle of these two titans of intellectual vacuity locked in mortal combat is enough to make one yearn for the comparative wit and subtlety of a Punch and Judy show. The coup de grace of this symphony of pseudo-profundity comes when our dynamic duo spends a mind-numbing 20 minutes parsing the finer points of social media censorship, as if the fate of Western civilization itself hinges on the ability of some alt-right edgelord to spew hate speech on Twitter. It's the kind of myopic navel-gazing that makes one want to grab both parties by the shoulders and remind them that there are, in fact, more pressing issues facing humanity than the latest front in the culture wars. As the podcast finally mercifully grinds to a halt after 2 interminable hours, one is left with the overwhelming sense that we've all just been subjected to an elaborate exercise in intellectual onanism. Peterson, for all his prodigious verbal output, has managed to say virtually nothing of substance, his insights amounting to little more than warmed-over self-help bromides and reactionary grievance peddling. Phillips, meanwhile, comes off as the living embodiment of the old adage that the opposite of a great truth is also true, his milquetoast centrism leaving him in the unenviable position of being loathed by both sides of the political spectrum. In the final analysis, this episode of the Jordan Peterson podcast stands as a depressing testament to the degraded state of public discourse in the age of social media and soundbites. It's a world where intellectual posturing and ideological axe-grinding have supplanted genuine curiosity and good faith engagement, where nuance and complexity are sacrificed on the altar of virality and rhetorical bombast. If this is what passes for the life of the mind in the 21st century, then God help us all. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a pressing appointment with a bottle of Johnny Walker and a copy of the Gulag Archipelago. I fear it's the only way to wash the taste of this verbal detritus from my mouth. Until next time, dear listeners, assuming there is a next time after subjecting myself to this dreck, where did I leave that bloody corkscrew?